Hi. Welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner, senior film writer for Now Magazine, and this is the other thing I do. I hope it's helping you pass the time wherever you are. My guest this week is Jess Salgueiro, an actor and writer you've seen pop up in Orphan Black, Workin Moms, The Expanse, Mary Kills People, The Boys, and Letterkenny, and on the big screen most recently in Mouthpiece and I'll Take Your Dead. And she stars as a Toronto pot dealer trying to cope with legalization in Jordi Saba's Canadian Strain, which arrived for sale and rental on digital platforms just last week. Jess picked One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Milos Forman's acclaimed 1975 adaptation of the Ken Kesey allegorical novel about conformity and individualism expressed as a battle of wills between the inmates and staff of a remote mental institution. Jack Nicholson and Louise Fletcher star as characters who personify the conflict, rebellious patient R.P. McMurphy and controlling Nurse Ratched. They're supported by a remarkable collection of performers, including Brad Dourif, Christopher Lloyd, Danny DeVito, and Will Sampson. It's an electrifying drama that was also a critical and commercial smash, and the first film since It Happened One Night to win Oscars for Best Picture, Actor, Actress, Director, and Screenplay. Only The Silence of the Lambs has managed it since. As you'll hear, we taped this episode earlier in the month. It is in fact the last Semcast I recorded before everyone went into lockdown. Don't worry, it'll be fine. I have a few shows banked for future release, and we're experimenting with some remote options going forward. It might get weird, but the podcast will continue. This is Someone Else's Movie.
Well, I chose One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest because I actually did the stage play in college, and I played R.P. McMurphy.
Okay.
But I played it as a bisexual woman on a co-ed ward. So there was men, and it was it's
a bit of a leap for
theater
the concept,
school,
but, yeah.
So we had mostly women in our class. So they had to make it work somehow. And the director, I hadn't seen Cuckoo's Nest, and the director was like, don't watch it until you're done the show. So I didn't touch it. And then I watched it, I feel like I watched it probably a year after I'd graduated. And it was such a good time, I think, to watch it because I was just starting my career.
Right.
And there was just something so liberating after being through theater school where, I somehow sort of escaped this a bit, but there's definitely a lot of, they want to tell you your hit. They want to be like, you're an ingenue or you're a character actor.
Right.
Essentially, those are the two things for women. You're either that or the other. I somehow kind of managed to not fall into anything too limiting. However, watching this right when I was kind of starting my career was so it was so exciting because I was like, wow, this is what's possible. You can be this free. Like, all the characters, it's not just McMurphy. I feel like all of the performers have these beautiful moments of they're enjoying it. There's like this delight in it. And there's also this like real honest pain. It's just, it made me realize like there's no formula. There's no like, you need to be like this, you need to be like that. You just need to be present and be yourself as an actor.
Yeah, I hadn't seen it in a really long time. Maybe 20 years. And I was stunned at how loose it is, at how the camera is so lively. It feels like a documentary, but it doesn't feel like a documentary of the asylum. It feels like a documentary of a performance. Like it's exactly what you said. Everybody is so active. You're watching the camera catch the method, whatever this thing is. It's like a master class. It's like a scene study that just doesn't stop. And sometimes there's music, and sometimes they go outside. But in that it was based on a play and broken out a tiny bit, it really doesn't feel like that. It feels like you're in it. Yeah. Like you're just sitting at eye level with everyone else as it all happens.
Yeah. Apparently, the group therapy scenes, the director Milos would have 3 cameras set up all the time so that he didn't miss anything.
Right, which was just something now that's standard, but then nobody...
Oh, yeah, yeah. Which is also, like, so... As a performer, I'm so grateful for that, because it's... Once you do something, you need to have the continuity, and then
Sure.
sometimes it loses that beautiful, delicious spark that was just, like, in that moment. But sometimes it wasn't captured, so you have to do it again, and then every time it sort of loses a little bit more of its specialness.
Yeah.
And also the story is just, there's metaphor upon metaphor upon metaphor in terms of just, like, the outsider disrupting the system, and also giving the power back to people.
Yeah.
I found that so delightful. I keep saying delightful because that's, like, literally what... watching it again yesterday, I'm like, this is so delightful. But yeah, I feel like it's also so relevant now, and probably always will be.
It does have a timelessness, right? I mean, there's always going to be institutional abuse, and there's always going to be someone who pushes back. But the specificity of it here, the thing that really strikes me is that, like, this is just after Vietnam. I mean, during Vietnam, when the play was performed, and I think pre-Vietnam when the book was written, and Kesey was inspired by his time at a VA, as I understand it, working at a VA hospital, and so it's really more about trauma and damage and people putting themselves back together, but it's also about the impulse to form teams and build support systems that the system itself isn't providing.
Yeah. And
to watch all of those things in play, along with this larger metaphor about the state and the individual, and just the way that time... I mean, you could make the case now that it's a 21st century story because it's all about someone who wants to stay true to himself, and you could almost come up with a social media analog about being ground down by the pressures around you to conform and be part of the thing. I mean, it's infinity. It goes on forever, and it's been going on forever. But also, and this was what hit me about this version, this viewing, it's so raw and of the moment, and it doesn't, like, there's this and there's Last Tango in Paris, and there's nothing else that captures that sort of intense American thing that was happening right at that time, and it went away. Method performances never went away, but this idea that you can create a space where the story happens and just live in it, right? It's so powerful. Wow. Yeah. 45 years later, it still really, really lands.
I wonder if that had to do with the content itself, like the fact that you are in a mental hospital. Yeah. So there's a permission given to the actors, to the world, to just be fluid with their performances, or do whatever their instinct is telling them, because it's, again, it's outside of formula on how to behave, or how to be a hero, or how to be a villain. I love Nurse Ratched in this too. I appreciate her more now watching it, because I had way more sympathy for her.
So did I.
Yeah. I was like, that's a real person. And, like, especially at the time, she's definitely doing her best. Like, in ways, she's actually quite generous. And then, obviously, there's, near the end with Billy, that's awful. But she doesn't know any different either. Yeah. She's come up in a culture that shames people around everything, around sexuality especially, and so I'm sort of like, well, it's not really her fault, and I loved that about this. Maybe it's looking at it through a different lens, being older and being, it being 2020. I'm less reluctant to want to look at anyone in a dualistic way, as, like, hero, villain. I like stories where there's constantly contradiction with the characters, because I think that's real. That's humanity. We're full of contradiction. Yeah. And I just, watching it now, I just really appreciated that about her character.
Yeah, I'm kind of amazed at my own turnaround too, because I thought it was pretty well defined that Ratched was she's the antagonist, but from her point of view, McMurphy's the antagonist because he's a dick who won't stop whatever it is she wants him to stop doing. And she's the authority figure. And you see Fletcher, or I did this time anyway, it felt like she's ramping herself up to confront him in more than one scene where she's putting on an armor or putting on the act of the inflexible Nurse Ratched, the thing that cannot be negotiated with or bargained with, and just clamping the hammer down on him because it's the only way she can handle him, and it's wrong, and maybe she knows it, but she commits, so she can't stop.
Right.
And there's never, now you would have, there's is it Ryan Murphy doing Ratched with Sarah Paulson? It's his show, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And I'm sure they will give us moments in that where she stops and wonders, or she has a moment of doubt with herself, if not with anyone else. And I don't know that, it's clearly not necessary in the film because she's not the focal performer. But I don't know that I want to see that either. I only want these tiny little moments where I think I saw conflict because that makes her more interesting to me.
Sure. Absolutely.
I don't know how much you can humanize someone who chooses to be inhuman.
Right.
But the choice is what matters.
Sure. And also, I think watching it again, I really was conscious of the fact that she's with a group of men. And that she is quite vulnerable. Obviously, some of them are unpredictable. And have tendencies to violence.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, that's a really scary place to be. And I guess I understood the mass, or the inability to crack her armor a little bit more, because I'm like, of course she has to be like that. There were a couple characters that I feel like I just saw, oh my gosh, Turkle, the guard that lets Candy and her friend in.
Right.
And when they destroy the ward and he gets caught by the supervisor for letting them have this party, and he just keeps saying, this is my job. This is my job. And I'm like, yeah, it is his job, you assholes.
Yeah.
And obviously at the time, all things considered, that he's a racialized man, and these guys are just completely taking advantage of him. My heart broke for him. I was so stressed for him. I think I was the most stressed I felt throughout the whole movie. I was like, guys, Turkle though.
Yeah, and they're playing on his humanity, and ultimately he thinks he's doing a good thing. He is doing a nice thing, but it goes horribly wrong because this is that kind of movie.
Yeah.
It's not, again, it's not going to have a happy ending. Nothing in this movie is going to go well.
Yeah.
But it's kind of fascinating to see that as things go wrong, and we're always on the side of the people who are trying to hold on to normalcy. Even characters like Billy, who have no normalcy, but probably could. He seems like he could be okay if he was treated properly, if he got some therapy, if they actually dealt with whatever it is that's in him, that's pulling him apart, rather than just medicating him and shaming him.
Yeah.
Every time you see that there's a better way out, there's another way to do this that could have been better.
Yeah.
Except maybe for McMurphy, who halfway through just sort of commits to destroying himself, which again is fascinating.
Absolutely.
Because the martyr's path is kind of the most trite, dramatic thing, but it doesn't play that way here because Nicholson has so much life in him, and he's so... it is the beginning of, the bad Jack Nicholson performance, the thing that is just him coasting on charm and chaos. But it's so good.
Yeah.
It's like, this is a hate of the pure stuff.
The what?
The pure stuff. The whatever that thing is.
Oh, yeah.
You see it in Easy Rider. You see it in The Last Detail. A couple of other movies he made around that time where he was just this... Yeah, it comes back in The Shining. That's true. But it's so potent.
Oh, it's so potent. Also, I think what might save it a bit is, like, he has heart in it.
Yeah.
Like, when Billy, like, right at the end, when he has a choice to leave and, like, he knows something happened and he had to go back. And just when he's seeing how, like, in the group therapy, how some of the men are being spoken to, and he's just like, whoa, they're being talked to as children. Like, you could just see it in him. He's like, this isn't okay.
Yeah. It's that Western thing, right? Like the loner with the code. He can't not involve himself.
Totally.
Yeah.
I also was things that also I picked up on more, I suppose, is how disposable the women are in this. Like Candy and her friend. Again, I can't even remember her name. That's how much I was affected by it too. But how they use them as essentially currency.
Yeah.
And I understand, obviously, this is context at the time, but also that's part of these films that sometimes is a bit hard to watch, I guess. Also, I was reading some stuff about it being a bit of a white savior movie.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah, with McMurphy's relationship with Chief.
Yeah, when you have basically the only native character in the film and he doesn't speak, but he learns to open himself up again because of the white man.
Exactly.
That is kind of obvious, especially, and again in 1975 there was a lot going on around America's treatment of Native Americans, and that kind of went away and never came back, which is very frustrating. But at the time, it was a really big deal. I think that they got Will Sampson to play that part, and that the film treats him as, because he was the narrator in the novel, and Kesey basically disowned the adaptation before ever seeing it because he heard that it wasn't going to be shot from Chief's perspective. Although I don't know how you can do that in a film, right? Because it's just, unless you have constant voiceover. But Chief is the narrator, so he has a voice in the book that he's denied in the film.
I did not realize that.
Yeah, it's a
novel.
It's a really weird change.
That is a huge difference.
And I think it's done with the best of intentions because it focuses the story more on the conflict between McMurphy and Ratched, which is the core of the story.
Yeah.
It's just that it's no longer witnessed from the perspective of... They try. I mean, there are a lot of shots of Sampson just looking at things.
Right.
But again, if he's not speaking, if he's not involved, it is somehow, it's less than, right?
Absolutely.
Like it marginalizes him.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's probably a perspective that's like, well, you can, in a way, this is the biggest tragedy of all. That, like, when Chief has his monologue about his father and how his father, no one killed his father, but they killed his spirit.
Right.
And that, in the end, Chief is the only one to escape. There's kind of a beautiful thing to that. Obviously, accompanied with what we just said, the fact that Jack Nicholson's character is the one that allows him the permission is annoying.
Inspires him to greatness and also murder. But,
True.
And that's still a victory, right? It still plays as... Because McMurphy has destroyed himself, ultimately. There's a point where he could go along, there's a point where he could get out, and this is where he ends up, and there's no question in the movie's mind that Chief is doing the right thing. Yeah. And it's just, it's weird and sad and peaceful and angry all at once.
Yeah, it is. Makes me want to read the novel. Now that you've said that it's written by Chief's perspective, it's
pretty good. There's something to it. And Murphy also, so you wouldn't know this too, Murphy was he's a giant red-haired Irishman.
Oh.
Yeah, which is a complete change from Nicholson. But I think once they cast him, that's over. You get Jack Nicholson at that point in his career, and you let him do whatever he wants to do.
Yeah, totally.
But it's a different experience, although the beats of it and the points of it are still the same.
Right.
And the overall argument is still,
right,
intact.
That ensemble of actors is remarkable.
Yeah, I was going to say try reading it without picturing any of this.
Okay,
It's impossible.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, how can I not imagine the guy who plays Cheswick? Like with the glasses.
Oh, yeah, right.
He was, I was just so compelled by him because I was like, he's, like, his inner child, like, voice is there. Like, as an actor, I was just like, this is brilliant. This is brilliant. Danny DeVito.
Christopher
Lloyd.
Yeah, Brad Dourif as Billy.
Oh, he's so beautiful.
Yeah. Who's
heartbreaking.
Never did anything else like that, which is so strange. I mean, he was almost immediately drafted into playing weirdos and villains. And he's had a great career and done all kinds of stuff, but it's shocking to realize, no, that's the same guy. Like, that's him.
Yeah.
He's Doc on Deadwood these days, or he was. Most recently, it's probably the biggest role he's had in a while. And
he was on Lord of the Rings, too, I think.
Yes, that's right. He's Wormtongue's advisor, was he?
Well, I don't...
Yeah.
Oh, yes!
It's been forever.
Yes, that was it.
I just remember thinking, hey, that's Brad Dourif.
Mm-hmm.
He's in like a bunch of David Lynch's stuff, and people are going to discover him in Dune now that they're remaking that. They'll go revisit that. He's the one with the big early speech, and it's just like, it's such an odd, eccentric performance. And then the further away we get from these things, it seems even stranger that Dune is 1984, and this was 9 years earlier, and it's the same. That's the career track he was on.
Interesting.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't mean to distract from Cuckoo's Nest, but, it is just this incredible collection of people who are all going to go on and be present in cultural stuff forever.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's also just interesting, like, how careers were shaped back then as now. I think just because of television and the opportunity to do stuff. I feel like as an actor now, like, there's just, at least in Toronto, at least just at this time, there's so much more content that I'm involved in.
Yeah.
And I'm just so interested about what it would be like, too, if I was back then. I mean, it'd be totally different, but being much more conscious of the films that I choose, I guess, or the films that I would even get offered or have the opportunity to be involved in. It's just a very different industry.
Yeah. Here, we're going to go shoot a movie in a mental hospital in Oregon.
Yeah.
For several months. Do you want to be part of it?
Yeah, I do. Sounds amazing. But yeah, I just feel like everything was a bit slower or something.
Well, there was less, right? I mean, there was less of the prestige stuff, certainly. If you were making an important movie, everybody knew it, and you had the space to work with it. This was Forman's second American movie, I think. The first one, nobody remembers. Taking off, something like that. Okay. It was a kind of a moderate sex farce, but he'd made films in Czechoslovakia before fleeing, Fireman's Ball, and I'm forgetting the name of the other really, truly great one, but they're on the wall behind you, in the Criterion section.
Oh, right on.
I have it all. And he's this art filmmaker known for his Eastern European approach, and then he comes here and makes a movie that doesn't totally land, and then they give him this Michael Douglas, son of Kirk, who played the role on stage and produced it as an adaptation. Michael Douglas somehow gets behind this and says, "Hey, let's work on this. Let's get the Czech guy," and he brings a perspective that is so completely flat, right? Like bleak. Like he builds a window into this story. That's what I was saying about thinking like you're sitting there with them. Who figures that out? Who sees a play or reads the book and figures out that you need to be one of the patients to make this work? Like, we have to be trapped in it, too.
Yeah.
Roger Ebert complained.
I take that so for granted. Like, I'm just thinking as a viewer, I totally took it for granted,
Yeah. Ebert's review complained about the fishing trip, that they shouldn't leave the asylum. And it opens up the movie too much. And I don't know. I think they need we need to see the taste of freedom. We need to see what it could be like for them.
Yeah, there's just a breath of something in that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's the one time the style changes too, where the film doesn't have that perspective.
True.
And suddenly you're just in a looser, outdoorsy I mean, it doesn't feel like a set. It doesn't feel like they did anything to gussy up where we are. We're just there with them.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I was just imagining, again, Cheswick, who I think is my favorite character, steering the ship, and he's like, Mac! Yeah, that's right. Like, he's just so scared. Oh, I love him so much.
Yeah. And that's what McCready does. He gets people to take chances and move outside their comfort zone and all the other things that now, like, that's your standard boilerplate hero role.
That's true.
And at the time, he's reviled for it. You know, it's the wrong thing to do, is to show these people that they can do more than they're doing. Yeah. Which is the anti-establishment aspect of it too. But it's such a, like, it was really weird to watch it now with the present day perspective of, oh, this is all standard. All this is stuff that is absolutely expected of every drama.
Sure.
And was it the first time anyone had tried this? It can't have been. But Casey just found something.
Maybe with this kind of content too, like with mental health and mental illness.
That's true.
I don't know if things were, I mean, literally the attitude was like, oh, they're in the loony bin. Yeah. It's like these castaways, these like forgotten people often. I think.
Well, no one's trying to treat them. They're just trying to medicate them. Like, to tranquilize them.
Exactly. Oh, man. Yes. And just the lobotomies.
Yeah. Anyway. Oh, no, it's horrible. And presented without any, I mean, I guess there's a little more, there's that nervous comedy about a little dabble do you when he's about to get electroconvulsive therapy, which is absolutely a torture tactic. I mean, that was what really surprised me this time. I hadn't seen it in forever, and I had kind of blurred on the specifics of that. And it's like, oh, no, she's just doing this to hurt him. That's all this is. She knows that whatever happens, it's going to make it worse. And it felt like, I mean, it's obviously the point where you can no longer be on board with Ratchet as a sympathetic character. But again, like, she makes the wrong choice, and that is in itself kind of fascinating and flawed and human. Yeah. And awful. But she chooses it, and that's a character decision, right? Like, it doesn't feel forced in the moment. We totally understand why she's doing the wrong thing. Yeah, absolutely. And how she is 100% justifying to herself that it's the right thing. Yeah. Because that's just how you conducted everything in the hospital. Yeah. It's like, you have to keep them sedated. You have to keep them under control. Yeah. Otherwise, there's risk. 100%. Right? And I think you're right. I don't know that anyone had really tried it like that before. There were, movies like The Snake Pit and all the famous ones from the 40s and 50s that were really much more melodramatic about people going mad and being locked up with other people who were mad. Yeah. And that's where it stopped. I guess Sam Fuller's Shock Corridor would have been the late 60s. I haven't seen it. It's great, but it is in no way a real representation of mental illness. It's like it's about a journalist who fakes insanity to get himself committed to an institution to expose a murder, and goes insane himself in the process. Right. Spoiler. But it's it's all Dutch angles and crazy music and like quote unquote crazy music. Right. The idea to put us in the head of a world gone mad, and it really works. It's a fun ride, but it is in no way like this came along less than 10 years later, I think, and it's just, they're worlds apart. Such a different way of looking at people in an institution. Oh yeah. And letting the actors fill in the characters that don't have a lot to do or say. I mean, there's just like a couple of small things DeVito does with his hands and with his shoulders that make me see that guy. Yeah, and he's like this smile he has on his face, even like he has this smile in his eyes, like even when he discovers Billy's body. Like there's just this, and for me, like at least when you're trying to discover character and movement and stuff, it's like, where do they hold the tension? It's not really that he's smiling, it's just that this is like how he can control his experience. There's just something. Anyway, I just thought that was such a smart choice, such an interesting choice.
Yeah. Yeah. I just think it holds up in a lot of ways and also points to a lot of things that were problems with storytelling at the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, about the putting the power back in people's hands, I think it's really interesting that a lot of these characters were voluntary.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, committed.
Yeah.
Intentionally, voluntarily.
And I'm of two worlds about this because McMurphy's very upset that they're voluntary. He's like, get the hell out of here. But then also there's part of me that's like, good for them.
Yeah.
That they know that they need some help right now. And like Billy at one point is like, when he asks to go on a date with Candy, and Jack's like, well, why not right now? And Billy's like, no, like, I'm not ready.
Yeah.
And I was like, he's not ready. He knows he's not ready.
And he's right, because it all goes to hell. I mean, it is.
Absolutely. Like, and so there was, I guess watching it now, there was, and with the way that we talk about mental health now, the language we have around it, about boundaries, about your own boundaries and stuff, I was like, I saw that stuck out to me now, where I was like, it's kind of cool in a way that they knew this about themselves.
Yeah, it's in the material, even if it's not sort of acknowledged in the same way that it would be now.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder how would you even do it now? How did you do it? How did the stage version play out?
Well, we still said it in the 60s? Late 60s? How did we do it? In terms of...
Well, what was the perspective? What was the tone of it?
Well, in a way, sexuality and gender had a lot to do with it. Because I was no longer an unhinged, quote-unquote, man in Nurse Ratchet's eyes. I was a woman. And there was something that was almost a bit more of a threat to the way that she looked at the world. Because I'm also very sexual, like talking about sex all the time. Candy is a character who is still in the play, and also there was a part it was in the film as well that was cut out, where McMurphy is in his boxer shorts in front of Ratchet, and there's supposed to be this like intimidation about this man who's not clothed in front of her, and we're like, well, it's not the same for a woman to be in her underwear in front of another woman. It's not intimidating in the same way.
Right.
So the director, who I really trusted, was like, okay, can we play this topless? Like, can you, because something about that freedom in front of Ratchet is intimidating.
Sure. It draws a contrast, if nothing else, for the...
Sure. And so I trusted the director, and I trusted the material, and so I did it. And so there was something, it was really like these two women, where one's holding on to, this is, you know, the way that a woman is expected to behave and expected to navigate the world. And then there was someone that was kind of breaking off. She's queer. She's loves having fun and expressing herself. And so I think the play started to really become about that, right. Actually.
Like propriety.
Yeah,
in the sense that there are things you just don't do.
Exactly.
Okay. I mean, that is the same conflict. Ultimately, it is expressed differently.
Yeah, I think it's just there are certain parts of the story that are different, literally, because my character's female.
And if you turn it into a conflict of personal expectation instead of the state, right? Like, it's not about... This is really... I wish I'd seen it. That sounds really fascinating. It's just the idea that Ratchet is driven by her own specific expectations
Absolutely.
instead of what is supposed to happen generally.
Yeah.
That makes Ratchet a lot more interesting too.
Yeah, I think I mean, in a way, I'd sort of like love to do this production again. Possibly with the blessing of I can't remember who adapted it to the play.
Well, Kirk Douglas is no longer around.
Yeah.
It's Nicholson's still kicking.
Yeah. But I'd almost like to see an updated version again with a female lead. Yeah. It was really amazing when we did it. Like, we loved what we did. We were really proud of it.
Yeah. I mean, it is such a masculine play.
It is.
It would change more than most, I think. It would actually change everything about the adaptation to just flip one role.
Yeah.
Yeah, or several.
Yeah, there was a couple of like, half of the patients were men, half of the patients were women.
Oh, wow. Yeah, Ryan Murphy's not going to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think so. I also don't know if there's actually co-ed wards. Well, maybe. I'm not sure.
They're probably somewhere, but
Yeah.
it feels like it would be, especially with the nature of, well, McMurphy's in there for something. It wasn't violent exactly, right? It was coercion of...
Well, there was assault.
There was assault.
And apparently there's statutory rape.
Yeah. Which is something that you'd have to deal with now, I think.
Oh, yeah.
In a much more aggressive... It felt to me in the movie as though they're leaving some question as to whether or not that actually happened, but, you know, whether it's just a convenient charge to throw him in.
Right.
But it sounds like it happened, or something.
Well, he kind of admits to it to the doctor. He was like, she was 15 going on 30 or whatever
right,
he
yeah,
said.
It's
And
boasting.
yeah, and he was like, she told me she was 18. Da, da, da. Yeah, that, especially in this culture right now, like, definitely.
Oh yeah, you'd need to interrogate that somehow.
Yeah,
I think I made the decision in my mind that he hadn't actually slept with her, that he'd been arrested on statutory charges, and that was enough to do it. But no, you're right. He probably did.
Yeah, he's boasting about it.
That guy would do it. Yeah, that's a problem.
Yeah, it is. And I feel like it's something that would have to be what you said, reinterrogated again. But
if it's a woman, that changes things again, right? Like
it does.
It's just more, well, loaded is the wrong word, but it is more. There's more material. There's more to dig into.
It's a different conversation around it.
Yeah. Oh,
it really is.
This is really fascinating.
I like, oh, now it's become about my college play.
I'm curious. It sounds like you had a handle on the material.
We had a blast doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was cool because I didn't watch the movie, and then watching it after having done the production, it was pretty cool to see how I feel like we captured some of what they captured in the film. In terms of this beautiful ensemble. Mm-hmm. It's really in the material.
What's the essence of it, right?
It is.
Codependence and interdependence.
Yeah.
I guess, and the way that I think it was Ebert's review. I was reading a bunch of them just to refamiliarize myself with the way it was received at the time, and Ebert didn't ultimately like it. He thought the ending was a cop-out, that it said Billy's death is predetermined, and he just didn't buy it, that things would go that way, which is always weird because that is where they go. That's what happens in the movie, and you can choose to accept it or not, but it's like, yeah, that's where the material always went. That's what happens in the book and everything else. But one thing he said was that McMurphy has an impulse to form teams, that his whole thing is to organize everyone against somebody, and that's the dynamic that dooms him. It's because he wants to one-up Ratchet, and at first it's taunting, and then it's rage because he's denied the World Series, and
right.
the way he just keeps forcing everybody into this group that is on his side, that is more disruptive than anything else that happens in the course of the film. And Ebert's not wrong about that. it's weird to see it from, like, again, you kind of want to watch it from Ratchet's perspective. This destabilizing force arrives and ruins everything.
Right.
And I'm pretty sure that's where the Ryan Murphy show is going to go.
Interesting.
But I get it, and at the same time, there's so much of that is 1970s. Like, that is countercultural, post-hippie, anti-authority, defy the man, although the man is a woman in this case, which is also really interesting. But I saw it with, this is going to sound like a stretch, and I apologize, but I saw it just, this, like, Elizabeth Warren just dropped out of the race, and the weird condescension that she was getting. It kind of clicked in my head that this, like, if you were determined to see her as the fun ruiner, as the woman who, I have a plan, let's behave, then maybe that's the same kind of relationship, I think, that was starting to form. Like, certainly the Bernie Sanders supporters were treating her that way, and Biden's people don't know what to do. But like, I'm so pissed off. I voted for her in the primary.
Yeah.
Dual citizen, I get to do that.
Oh, right on.
And it didn't do anything. But watching that happen and then watching Cuckoo's Nest again, it's like, shit, that we've learned nothing. It's been 45 years and we still treat any woman with a semblance of competence and authority as a monster. Or that's McMurphy's immediate response to Ratchet.
Yeah, and there's also this thing of, I'm trying to imagine if Ratchet was a man.
Yeah.
I think there would definitely be something where McMurphy would try to be like sidling up, like
he'd
allying.
buddy him, right?
And if that didn't work, I feel like it would be like, okay, then it's violence. Then I have to take this person out.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something about how he terrorizes her.
Yeah, it's cruel.
It's cruel. Yeah, exactly. That I don't know. I'm not a man, but I wonder if that tactic would have ever been employed if it was a man.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the way you described it is exactly right. He would try to make friends. Mm-hmm. He never tries that with Ratchet. He doesn't try to sweet talk her. He immediately just puts up a wall.
Mm-hmm.
And
even when he's sweet talking her, it's sarcastic.
You can feel it's not real. Yeah. And maybe that is because, not maybe, I'm sure it's because he doesn't see her as attractive, right? Like, if he tried to seduce her, it would be far, far worse.
True.
But the way that, and it works in the performance. I think Nicholson is, I'm sure he's conscious of everything he's doing.
Yeah.
But the rivalry he sets up and the way he isolates her with just dialogue, and then the way he physically responds to her by pulling back and not being close.
Mm-hmm.
And, well, when he is close, it's an intimidation tactic. It's ugly, mm-hmm. and it's ugly in a really effective way that speaks to gender relations, and especially in the 70s when things were just so completely swaggering. The Summer of Love did not take, and Women's Lib would have just been defeated, I think, because that was the ERA was 74. No, maybe it was 76.
When the film came out was
75. Yeah, I don't remember that one specifically, that timeline, but it was there, like it was in the air,
right?
And he is like consciously playing a toxic masculine presence,
totally,
and she responds by armoring up and getting harder and getting cruel back at him, and it's like, I'm going over it and thinking, wait, did he start it? Is he actually the instigator as well as the aggressor? Because she becomes the villain, but I think there's a point where maybe she wasn't, and he never gave her the chance to. I
totally agree. I think there was a point where she wasn't. Yeah. Like, I thought the same thing, where I was like, she's being like, in group therapy, being like, okay, Randall, like, you speak, and giving him space to speak, really. Yeah. And he's stirring stuff up. I think where it really shifts is, for me, watching it, is when it was the way she was treating Cheswick it was when he was asking for the cigarettes and stuff, and I can't remember exactly what it was. But it was the vote. It was the vote.
The World Series.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. When they're like, we got the votes. And she's like, no, the vote was over. I mean, I understand drawing those hard lines, but oof. I was like, oh man. Your character's not coming back from this.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting what you said about Elizabeth Warren.
I'm so pissed about that.
It's heartbreaking.
Really, yep. The most competent candidate.
Absolutely.
And, it happened in 2016. I mean, it happened in 2016, it happened now, and it's going to happen again. And I really can't wait for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I want to say AOC, but then I also want to say her whole name, so my brain is fighting. I cannot wait for her to run, because she will just not put up with any of this shit.
Absolutely.
She will be so good at it.
Oh, she'll be amazing.
Yeah.
She'll change everything.
Yeah. And they'll put her in an institution before that happens, because just to keep it on point, because the Democrats are inherently self-destructive, and self-sabotaging.
Right.
Oh man, now I'm just depressed again.
No.
But to get back to the point of the podcast, is there anything in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest? I mean, obviously you've used it on stage, but before you saw the film, is there anything in the film that you have subsequently borrowed or absorbed?
Yeah, I think so. It's a reminder that the most delicious moments of cinema are, for me, I think as an audience member, and I hope to implement as an actor, is when it's so deeply unique, it's so authentic, it's so them, it's so, hopefully next time I do something, so me, something that just feels that it's not a reproduction of something you've seen before. And I feel like there was so many performances aside from McMurphy that had that quality. And I think for me, it's a reminder that that's the magic of cinema, that's the magic of telling stories, is when you're like, oh, that's a person.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. It happens every now and then where you're watching something and suddenly you just go, who is that? I want to follow that person for the rest of this movie, and it's not about them, but I'm mad now.
Absolutely.
Something happened.
Philip Seymour Hoffman in everything he does or has done. And an acting teacher said this a few months ago to me, the voice of media, be careful of the voice of media, meaning like, say you're playing a cop and you get used to how a cop talks.
Right.
So then you're doing a reproduction of a reproduction. And so this just is kind of reminding me to come back to the basics. Like, this is a person that behaves a certain way, expresses this feeling a certain way. It should never be copying someone else's performance. And that's something that I have to kind of always remind myself of. Because it's easy, it's insidious sometimes as an actor. You're like, oh, this is a tough guy. You're like, oh, no.
I mean, we all know what we have, like the formed ideas, right? So of course, we all know what that voice is or who that person is supposed to be, but it's inauthentic at least, and phony at best. Yeah. So, okay, what's the performance where you feel like you captured that the most? What is the most authentic thing? Oh. I mean, I want to say Letterkenny, but... Yeah, Letterkenny. Just because it's you and Kelly bouncing off of each other so beautifully.
Thanks. Yeah.
No, I love that.
Oh, we had that's one of my favorite jobs, ever of all time. It's so easy in this way, just because, I mean, the words really speak for themselves. Like, I feel sometimes I just have to go there and open my mouth and just say it. Like, the words do the work. Yeah. But yeah, no, that character, sure. I just filmed a pilot that I feel like I accessed that again. Okay. A bit of that. There was a lot of freedom in this character that I felt like I could just do whatever I wanted and they liked that. I didn't have a preconceived idea of who they were.
Okay.
I've been starting to do this thing when I audition where I don't look at the breakdown, like the description of the character, where they're like, she's stoic and da-da-da. I see, like, okay, the name of the character, what's the relationship with these people? Okay, cool. Read the scenes, the script if I have it, and I just try to do what I want. And that seems to be pretty well received. I'm like, oh yeah, again, this is just, in this weird way, acting's like the art of self-realization. It's being, at least for me, I want to be as radically honest in whoever I'm playing as I can be, and that is showing myself.
Right, sure.
You know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely am so happy that I revisited this right now in my career. For sure.
How often do you get back to it?
This is the first time I got back to it since
really?
I'd watched it like 10 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
I love it when we can do this. We can just, truly revisit something that people, there's stuff that people know inside and out.
Mm-hmm.
And even for me, like, it had been a long time since since the DVD special edition maybe came out that I had not watched this film. And yeah, holds up. Mostly.
Yeah. Mostly, yeah. But I think it's great that also as a culture we're evolving and able to even have the language to talk about what bothers us about this now.
Yeah.
Because I think we should always be changing and moving and rumbling with all of this.
Yeah, well, I keep coming back to that on this show just because it deals with stuff that's decades old so often.
Right.
The movies are fixed. Like, it's us. We change. Every time you revisit the movie, you're different. You bring something else. Ideally, hopefully it's good to know that you've evolved or at least advanced when you revisit something. And so, yeah.
It's also so scary.
I wonder what it'll look like in 10 years.
Yeah, true. Yeah. So true. It would be like, they don't have, psychiatric wards don't exist in the same way. Yeah. Or like, who knows?
Yeah. And our stuff is going to look so weird.
Oh, yeah.
I'm worried about that. I'm always worried about that.
Really?
What am I screwing up for the future? What terms am I using incorrectly? What am I missing?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. How have I condescended to someone accidentally?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's hard.
I know. It never goes away, but it's a reminder. You're right. It's a reminder of who you were. Mm-hmm. And now you're better. Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. No, I think I'm an optimist. I have hope that we are getting better.
Yeah. I hope so too. And also, I think it's just a general optimistic act to assume that we'll still be here to watch movies in 10 years.
Oh man. That's a whole other conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, wash your hands, everybody.
Yeah, exactly. Stock up on the hand sanitizer. Yeah.
My thanks to Jess Salgueiro, whose new movie Canadian Strain is now available on demand on your digital platform of choice. It pairs her with a dozen or so of Toronto's best character actors, including friends of the show Natalie Brown and Naomi Snicket. Take a look. Thanks also to Robin Mogul. She knows what she did. You can find Jess on Twitter at Jess Salgueiro, all one word, and you can find One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest on Blu-ray and DVD from Warner Home Entertainment. It's also available on iTunes and Google Play. As always, you can find me on Twitter at Norm Wilner and elsewhere on the internet at nowtoronto.com. You can also find this podcast on Twitter at Semcast, S-E-M-Cast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. Our theme song is by The Last Year. If you like it or you've been enjoying the show in general, say so. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts. Every little bit helps, it truly does. And check out the other shows on the Frequency Podcast Network. As I mentioned last week, The Big Story is devoting itself almost entirely to coronavirus coverage, and it's really helpful. Thanks for your support, and thanks for listening. Stay inside, watch some movies. We'll see you next week.